Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting episode of The Chase, the show that dives deep into the world of high performance alongside some of the world's most esteemed athletes, influential leaders, and ambitious individuals who are making their mark on the world. I'm your host, Christian Dyer, and today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Casey Adams, 22-year-old entrepreneur, esteemed podcast host, businessman, accomplished author, and a great representation of relentless ambition. Casey, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure.
Christian, thank you so much for having me on the show, brother. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it. How are you?
Doing good, man. Cannot complain. It's finally sunny out here in Marina del Rey, California. So wrapped up an awesome run this morning and just enjoying the day, getting to it.
Speaking of runs, are you still doing 75 hard? I saw you went down that rabbit hole.
I am, and it's interesting because, and I got the water here to prove it, right? We're chugging away at our gallon, but yeah, I'm on day 95, and 75 hard is 75 days.
Yep.
I've done it before, and we'll dive deep into it, but I decided to keep going because of the alternative was just not operating at the potential in which I know I can operate from. And that's not a forever thing, right? I'm not doing this program for the rest of my life, but just in the moment where I am, the circumstances of the time of year, and just I'm just so locked in that I asked myself 6 or 7 questions when I was deciding to keep it going. And this was on day 76 when I woke up that morning, because I really had no plans to keep going. And it was just, do you want, why would you not drink a gallon of water today? Couldn't answer that, right? It's easy to do. I've been doing it 75 days. Boom, that's great. Why would you not work out today or go on your 45-minute walk and do things that obviously move the body, make you feel great? And just why would you not do that? So after asking myself just all the questions of the tasks on the list, I'm like, all right, great. I'm going to do it today. And that's been the constant mindset up until today in terms of why I'm still doing it. Obviously, there's different versions of 75 hard in terms of phase 1, phase 2, live hard and everything. But I'm just doing all the 75 hard key list items and taking it day by day.
And it becomes a lifestyle rather than there's less intent. You're not forcing yourself to drink the water. It just becomes second nature.
That's truthfully what it is. Every morning, when I wake up 5:30, 6 a.m., the first thing I do is go downstairs and fill up my gallon. Or sometimes I'll do it the night before, but I prefer even just, in the spirit of waking up and doing that. It's that's the first thing I do every day. And I woke up one morning and I was like, it feels off, right? If you're doing something for that many days consistently, and that's the, 2-3 minutes when I'm filling up, or 2 minutes when I'm filling up my gallon, I set my intentions for the morning, for the day, and just it gives me that, little moment to just be one with, when I'm filling up my water bottle. So yeah, as you said, it's definitely been a day by day and more of a habitual response to it. And I'm excited to, just take it day by day.
But before you started this 75 hard, it's not like life for you was anything less of pretty remarkable. Businesses, podcasts, you had so much going on. But what was it that was like, maybe I should pay a little more attention to it, or maybe I can be more intentional with what goes into my body, what I'm doing from a health and wellness standpoint? Why'd you make that conscious decision to go down the 75 hard path?
Yeah, for those that don't know, I think it's great to reference. So 75 hard, it's a mental toughness challenge created by a guy named Andy Frisella. And the items that you have to do every day, I'll list them out real quick. So you have to do 2 45-minute workouts. One workout must be outdoors. You have to follow a diet. You have to take a progress picture in the mirror. You have to drink a gallon of water, no alcohol or no cheat meals. And then you have to read 10 pages a day of a physical book. So that's the items for those that might not know. And, why I decided to do the program, as you said, some people do it because they're looking for massive change in their life. Some people are doing it to sharpen their discipline. Some people are just doing it because it's something hard to do. And it, at the end of the day, the whole program is built on discipline and mental toughness and the small things in life. And it's supposed to, in my opinion, just reaffirm that framework as you live through life. And for me, I remember I had no intentions of necessarily doing it. It was one day just I'm on Instagram. I've known Andy Frisella for years. I've had him on the podcast years ago. I visited him in St. Louis, and I did the program actually before in 2020. and it absolutely changed my life and just how I think about discipline, how I think about my fitness. Even though it's not a fitness challenge, you obviously reap the benefits of getting more physically fit by doing all of those tasks
Yep.
every day. And again, I had no intentions of doing it, but I just saw Andy's story and he was getting started with it. Like, hey, I'm starting tomorrow, or I think he was on day 2. Sorry, and I just saw it and something just instantly clicked with me. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna commit to it, and committed that morning when I saw that story. Just because, it wasn't like I wasn't active. I've been getting really into running the past year. I grew up an athlete, played hockey for 10 years, played lacrosse for many years, played football, which led to me getting injured and in a neck brace for 6 months, which we'll talk about. But it wasn't like I was just seeking some type of like massive physical change because, I'm
Yeah.
consistent in the gym. Of course, we all go through ebbs and flows. But at the time, even prior to starting, I was on my game. I ran, my first marathon last December and was coming off of that early into this year and planning, to do an Ironman this year, run another marathon. And again, I just felt that the program truly does change your life. And I don't just say that to say, oh my God, it changes your life, but genuinely, right? Like going from someone that if you read 4 days a week and go to the gym 3 days a week and you drink enough water, right? Oh, like you'll have a dessert here and there. Like that's great. Like, and you can live a very healthy lifestyle if you just maintain that. But when you commit to 75 hard, like you're committed to the no deviation, like consistent discipline mentality, which is just for a lot of people, and I think we can all relate in some aspects of life. Like it's just very challenging to build that discipline in any aspect of life, right? Like you could read, 9 pages a day across 6 days of the week, but that's not doing the challenge, right? Like it's 10 pages, 7 days a week for 75 days. And I think that's the beauty of it is like that no deviation mentality. I just committed to it. And it's definitely been not only like when I think about the last 75, 95 days, sorry, from just February, it's invigorating to think about how much I've grown just from committing to it. And yeah, it's again, I know we're going on a rant here about the program, but it's quite transformative.
Absolutely. But it has so many parallels to life because discipline is like a muscle. If you don't work on it, you're never going to get
Yeah,
better. You're never going to have more discipline in your life. And so just because you took an approach through health and wellness, it has so many like other pillars in your life that it can relate to. And some of the best people I know, and I'm sure the best people you know, is like they're all taking care of their health. They're all
yeah,
conscious of what they're doing with their mind, their body, their soul, whatever. And so it's like such a great pillar. I know people who started it who, geez, one guy on my team did it this year and he's a completely different person. Just his
yeah,
intent with everything changes. And yeah, I mean, I'm stoked to hear that it's been transformative in your life. And it goes from a 75-day challenge to just it's a lifestyle. And when you buy into things becoming a lifestyle, they're sustainable. It's not like those diets that you go
yeah.
on for 30 days and then boom, done because you don't give yourself grace if you deviate from that path. It just becomes second nature. And so that's awesome. I appreciate that insight.
Of course, you're
Let's
spot
let's
on.
take it. Yeah, but let's take it back right now. I mean, you have hundreds of things going on and you're killing it. Businessman, you got acquired by Viral Nation and all this stuff. But can you take us back to the beginning of this, the journey, and share with us like what sparked that drive and ultimately that lifestyle that you dreamed of living?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was getting to it a little bit earlier when we were talking about sports, but and if you're watching this video, so there's this. I love referencing this because it's new. So there's this little trophy in the back of my
Yeah.
screen here, and for those that aren't seeing a video and you're listening to this, so it's this trophy of. If you can't tell, it's a neck brace at the top of this trophy, and it's painted in gold. This artist made it for me, and it has a plaque on it that says "Keep going and never quit."
Mm.
And I made a trophy out of a neck brace, and you may ask why. Because again, when I was 16 years old, I got injured playing football. I grew up in a small town outside of Richmond in Virginia. And again, I grew up an athlete, hockey, lacrosse, football. This injury in my life that occurred led me to being in a neck brace for 6 months. And it was one of those moments where you just can't predict the outcome or how it's going to change your life. But reflecting on it now and over the years, it was this moment where I walk into a doctor's office. I think I'll be fine. I'm 15, 16 years old, very naive to anything injury related by any means. And I walk in there, get my X-rays, expecting to walk out and join the team back in a couple weeks, maybe. Like maybe it's next week, right? Like it's my neck is very hurting, it's hurting me, but I know I'll be able to get back out there. And doctor comes in and he says to me, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is you're not paralyzed, which could have absolutely been an outcome here. And the good news is, oh no, excuse me, the bad news is you can never play football again, and you have to be in a neck brace for the next 6 months due to the instability of your spine.
Oh, geez.
And it was that moment that, again, like, it didn't cross my mind in terms of what was going to occur after or what it was going to lead to. And I truthfully didn't believe it at that time, right? Like, I'm very naive and resentful and like, no, like, I'll be good, I'll be good. And I mean, that was the reality. I never stepped back on a football field playing. I did heal enough where I played lacrosse and, I snowboard now, and I'm overall, like, I'm very physically capable of, I still experience neck pain, quite significantly at times if I'm, squatting something too heavy or carrying something in my back for too long, which is inconvenient. But that injury led to initially 3 months of depression, not knowing what to do with my time or my life, and just being angry and spiteful to my family, to my situation, and just being so like, I can't even fathom that this is happening to me, right? And that quickly changed into just diving down rabbit holes on social media, on YouTube, of business, of entrepreneurship and marketing, and following these different people such as Gary Vaynerchuk and Andy Frisella, Tony Robbins, all these different, like, entrepreneurs online. And what quickly became just a very negative situation in my life turned out to be a positive 1, 2, 3 month transformative period where I, quite frankly, didn't know it at the time, but found my purpose of what I wanted to do with my time then, right? I was so fascinated with business, of entrepreneurship, really all growing up, but I didn't come from any type of entrepreneurial family. My dad worked at a company, still does, called Philip Morris Tobacco Company. My mom's been babysitter, worked at restaurants, worked at a school as a teacher, special eds teacher. And just growing up, I never saw, I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs by any means. And it was throughout this time when one thing led to the next of, I start following Gary Vee. He's talking about social media. I start learning advertising and, how to manage Instagram pages, which leads to starting my first business at 16, which was like managing ads on Facebook for local businesses in my area. And that was, again, looking back, just the steps that occurred to create not even a change at the time, but just a different path, right? Like, we all have these different paths we can go down in life. And it was just in that moment where I decided to go down a different path. And, I believe from that day of not even from that day of getting injured, but I'll use that as a reference. It's just like 1 degree different of just commitment in terms of who I am and what I want from that day forward. And looking back, it's just mind blowing to see how that event has led to the life that I live today in the industries and what I do. But, again, and the quote that I love so much by Steve Jobs is, you can never connect the dots looking forward, only looking backward you can reflect and, see the path laid out. And I stand by that for sure.
Dude, it's so spot on. When I tore my ACL 3 days before going to Peru for the Pan American Games, which would have been the pinnacle of my, I guess, sporting career to that point, 2019. It just felt, I mean, you know what that's like. You get a sport taken away from you, and your whole identity, typically when you're young and you're an athlete, is rooted in sport. Or, football, lacrosse. For me, it was rugby. It's like, I was broken. Fast forward 2 years, I look back, biggest blessing in disguise ever. It forced me to almost reevaluate like my life, and also understand that people don't love me because I'm an athlete. People love me because I'm Christian Dyer. And then it forced me to figure out what else outside of kicking a rugby ball, chasing an egg-shaped ball for a living, like, gets me happy. And it's like, we go through these periods in our lives, and it's so funny that the low ones, the ones that look like they're the worst things ever that shouldn't happen to us, have the biggest meanings and the biggest lessons. And I
Yeah,
think more people can just sit back and start looking at their life and be like, wow, there was actually a ton of good from that.
absolutely. I mean, and that's the beauty of just not even like moments of change, right? Like I've had my podcast for almost 60 years now and started when I was 17, and all of the conversations that I have with CEOs, entrepreneurs, like athletes, from Larry King to Rick Ross to Elon Musk's mom, like people don't, it's not that they don't like, but when people talk about the great things happening in life, they say it a certain way. But when
Mm,
you get them talking about the triumphs, the failure, the hardships that they've dealt with, it's not even that just it's, it's more um, just enjoying to talk about, but it's that pain, that frustration, that event in their life has literally molded their brain to think a certain way, to act a certain way, and to experience what they may have now because of the hardships, right? Like, and I believe that's the beauty in and of it all. It's just being able to embrace that, to share that, to be vulnerable about that, and to spend time in those dark moments in a, in a way where you can share and educate and inspire, hopefully, but also just be real and authentic to who you are and what you've gone through, I think is so powerful, because that is, the input that has created every great entrepreneur, athlete, you name it, is the hardships, the late nights, like
mm.
the discipline to take a moment of negativity and not even just ignore it, but embrace it, right? Like when you're going through something, like embrace it as much as you can, knowing that, of course, you will come out on the side. You don't know how long that will be or what that entails, and it might get worse. But that's the beauty of, in my opinion, not only the conversations I've had over the years, but the ability to reference them, talk about them, and just be real with yourself and be ready for what's to come, because that's the beauty of life, the ups and
Yeah.
downs, and um, nothing is ever stagnant in terms of what is happening. You're growing, you're dying, and you got to always take the situation as is and really embrace it.
Yeah, and as much as like that journey taught me about life and setbacks being just opportunities for comebacks, like it was such a period in my life where I realized what I didn't want in my life. So many people always ask me, it's like, dude, what are you going for? What's the dream? And it's like, I don't exactly know what the dream is. I can't paint that picture yet, but I certainly can tell you what I don't want in my life.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that's such an important thing is it may not all look clear to you, but you can start to understand the lifestyle that you want to live and the lifestyle that you don't want to live. And then you just go to work every single day. Some of the best people I know, some of the smartest are like, dude, start like mimicking that lifestyle today, even though it's not reality. And over time, you just become that person.
Yeah, I mean, this is very relevant because I was thinking about it today, this morning, but there's this brand I literally just launched. It's mainly like an Instagram page right now called at
Manifestation.
Manifestation. Yeah, at Manifestation. And I've been sitting on the handle for a long time, and just started like built out the team, and we're pumping out great content on it right now. And there's a video of Rob Deerdeck, and I actually listened to this podcast where he says this and was talking about this, just this idea of manifestation. And he's just talking about like the life you want to live, like you really have to fully immerse and
Mm,
embrace that feeling that you think you will have in that
yeah.
moment today.
Yeah.
And not only is that so powerful, this idea of manifestation and believing, and the feeling that you will feel at a certain event, I think it even relates to something that's more tangible, right? Like when you have a trip coming up or an event that's happening or something that you are looking forward to. I saw this video the other day as well where it talks about the the idea and the excitement for that trip or that event and the actual feeling of that can be measured up to one another in a very similar experience in terms of your excitement for that versus actually living in that. And I think it's so true. Like I think just reflecting over the years on certain moments or events that you think will, make you so happy in the moment versus like the anticipation of that, and immersing yourself in that thought of what you believe it will feel like. I think that's just a testament to, like, you can get excited just thinking about something as if you were actually there. I think that's a very tangible way to not only think about this word manifestation, but just the way you live everyday life, in terms of the outcomes that you desire and what you're building. But obviously being very hyper aware of the moment you're in and taking that with extreme focus and dedication, not just living in la la land, of course. But yeah, I think that the manifestation page, that video with Rob Dyrdek that the team put out today, I think is just so spot on in terms of
Yeah.
life in general, and speaks volumes to obviously anyone that's out there building anything.
Yeah, no. The mind's such an important thing. You just mentioned you started a podcast 6 years ago, so you would have been 20,
17.
what, 17, 16?
Yeah, 17.
Okay. Why'd you start your podcast?
Yeah. So the whole reason I initially started, this was late 2017 in December when I started the show. A year prior, probably late 2016. That's really when I started, or I should say mid 2016 is really when I started putting out content on social media. Initially, it was book reviews because I had nothing really to talk about. I was learning Facebook advertising. I was, starting a business where I was doing just local Facebook advertising for businesses in my area. And I really wanted to go out and build a personal brand, put out content. And I knew that that could lead to much more in terms of the opportunities. And there was a book that came out around that time that Gary Vee published called Crushing It. And I remember the last chapter, one of the last chapters in the book, he talked about podcasting. And, after just reading the chapter, something spoke to me because, he talked about this idea and of just having a medium that is conversation based, that can be used to meet great people. And it's just a, unique medium at the time. You see all these different shows that are coming up. You see the Rogans, you go, oh, wow, like podcasting seems really cool. I had no experience in it by any means. And I initially wanted to start the show for three core reasons. And those three reasons are still true until today, which are: one, I wanted to meet quality, initially entrepreneurs, but people that I can build my network with and just meet great people. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, and through that, I want to learn something from these people. Being 17 at the time in a small town, having really no access to any high level business relationships, I was just craving that and desired that because I knew, that cliche quote, you are who you associate with. And that this idea of surrounding yourself with greatness was so important to me. And the podcast, in my eyes, would hopefully lead to that in terms of the ability to have conversations with, world class business leaders, people that I aspire to be, similar to in my own context, and just great world class individuals. And of course, that comes with learning from them. And then the third thing is just the business opportunities that can be created within that. I've always looked at business and still do. And over the years, it's only been cemented. It's like business is a people game, right? Like even in today's world with AI and all these incredible tools that I love so much, like the people that are running it, someone like Sam Altman at OpenAI, is like the critical element of like what's going to happen, the team behind it. And every team initially today, like it comes down to the people, from sports to business, you name it. So this idea of creating opportunities, like it tends to be with other people and people that have, done great things, whether that's your friends or business leaders. And I started the podcast on a pair of Apple headphones, just walking around my room. He's saying, welcome to episode 1 of the Casey Adams Show. The goal is to interview world class entrepreneurs. We'll get there, whatever it may be. And one thing led to the next in terms of my approach, which was mainly just cold outreach on Instagram and initially having friends of mine on the show. And I set out a goal the initial 90 days to do 60 interviews in 90 days because I had this meeting set up, like a quick 5-10 minute meeting with Gary Vee. And I just wanted to knock out as many episodes as I could to then, when I sit down with him, ask him questions, say like, hey, like, tell me what you're thinking. This is what I've been doing. Like, hit me, right? And that's what I did. And that ball of momentum just truthfully built such a fire inside of me of not only podcasting as a medium, but high quality conversations, the ability to build relationships, because I was seeing what was happening through that. And more importantly, how I was feeling when doing them and then after them, where I knew if I had an interview on my calendar for the day, I would be so stoked just knowing that I know that after that conversation, the way I would feel would be great. But I had to get my reps in too, right? Like that was when I look back on
Yeah.
my interviews, they're so different than the ones I do today in terms of my approach and just my ability and how I've grown. But the podcast, and to wrap up this point clearly, is has truthfully been the foundational element of not only my brand, the career, but everything in my life, from the ability to fundraise, the quality relationships, the ability to learn the different experiences. But from the business endeavors that I've pursued, I've all stemmed from, in some way, shape, or form from the podcast, which again, like creates those relationships. And, you can never predict what an interview or a conversation will do in your life, especially if they're intentional and with people that you truthfully want to learn from.
No, dude, that's so spot on. Like it's similar basis of mine. Starting it, like I love people, and
Yeah.
you just touched on it. Like the energy you get from having the conversations is so contagious. And I know the days that I have. I mean, this is second recording today. The day's been absolutely killer. And then I'm hoping that from this, I can just bring that energy to the team when I see them tonight. Bring good energy. Hopefully, inspire someone else with how I'm approaching my life and how I'm
Yeah.
approaching my day. For me, it's like I'm learning how to be a better listener. I'm learning how to speak better. I'm learning how to think differently. And now it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's teach everybody what I'm learning. And I know there's so much insight and so much value. And when I took the focus from just myself and what I can gain from this, and I started to understand that it's not just about me, it's about the listeners, about the audience, it took all the pressure off of me. And it just
Yeah.
made me want to do even more.
I love that. I mean, and too, like, and by the way, obviously we're still recording here, but like, you do such a great job, and I think like your story and the relatability and just everything that you're doing, I'm stoked for you. And just
Thank
podcasting
you,
as a
bro.
medium too, it's continuing to grow. I think
Yeah.
just it's obviously evolved so much from when I started in 2017 in terms of, in my opinion, not only the seriousness but the investment in it, the ad revenue, everything in the industry has grown significantly. I remember talking to the guys that created Riverside, which is the
Mm,
platform we're using now, like super early, just launching beta version of the product, and seeing
yeah.
how much this product has blown up has just been so incredible to see. And which leads me to now launching my own podcasting AI tool. And I just like believe in not only the medium from a personal brand building, relationship building perspective, but I believe that the medium as a whole will always change and evolve. But I'm just excited to not only have been in this industry of podcasting for the years that I have because I believe in it so much, but excited to be building in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I use Listener.
Appreciate it, brother.
I'm on it. Devin, shout out Devin. He got me on it. It's
Yes,
and
sir.
we'll touch
Appreciate
on
it.
Listener. We'll touch on Media Cats. Did you mention Elon Musk's mom? You mentioned Rick Ross. Who, like, what's been the coolest episode or the coolest guest you've been able to have on?
I would say the most impactful slash coolest in my personal opinion. And of course, there's so many cool people for different reasons, and not even cool, but like inspiring, impactful.
Yeah.
But my favorite interview has been the one with Larry King.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Legend, legend.
that one, it was just so serendipitous to how it happened. And of course, him being such a legend and an icon. And, there's a whole story there. But I was 19 at the time. He was 87. The age gap, he's born in 1933. He's lived this incredible, like
Jesus.
iconic life, the world's most famous broadcaster. Um, and I was 19, right? Born in the year 2000, just for context for people. And just the opportunity to sit down with him, I cherish even still to this day. And there's just moments where I'll be watching a show and there'll be like a Larry King cameo from an interview he did in the 70s. And it just still blows my mind that I got the opportunity to sit down with him, and that interview just meant so much to me. And I think it even speaks to a deeper point that I think a lot of people can relate to, right? Like I'm 17. Like, what do I have to like? Why would I start a podcast? Who cares to listen to me? Like why would I do this? And of course, I never listened to that voice in my head, but we all deal with that in terms of whether that's imposter syndrome or like believing you're not good enough, and it's the ability to prove to yourself over time that you are capable with small wins, small daily actions,
Yep.
discipline. That like that voice that you may hear is irrelevant, quite frankly, and you need to learn to silence it in an appropriate measure. And I think just that moment also with Larry King gave me such a stamp of like, wow, like what you have been doing and what you will continue to do, like just keep going. Like the simple quote that I always live by and I put on this neck brace trophy is just, I write it down almost every day. It seems anytime I journal it, I end it with keep going, never quit. And those four simple words have been the epitome of not only what I've learned from the hundreds of interviews that I've done, but just the undeniable truth about what creates greatness, what creates a world class individual, whether that's business, sports, or whatever field you may be in, is again, and it's so easy to say, and maybe some say it's cliche, but this idea of just keep going, never quit, like the
Yep.
ability to push through obstacles, whether that's in a marathon. And even on that note, I interviewed the CEO of the Honolulu Marathon last year in preparation for me running the marathon in Hawaii. And I asked him when I was interviewing him, I was like, do you have any regrets about your first marathon? You know, we're talking about the early days of him. Now he runs like a 50,000 person event, the fourth largest marathon in the world. And he's like, I'll never live down that I stopped on my first marathon, like for a brief moment. Maybe that's like to fix your shoe, to your sock, whatever it is. Like I stopped. And he said, you'll never have the opportunity to run your first marathon ever again. So do it and don't stop. Because that feeling of just persevering and this idea of again what I was talking about, like the keep going mentality. And I didn't think about it prior, and I didn't plan on stopping, and I didn't know what I would feel like in mile 24, right? But I was prepared. But I think that really stuck with me, and I think in whatever business or endeavor you're in, like if you take that concept of just like if you talk about to someone like Jim Barahall, who's the CEO of the Honolulu Marathon, and just apply that, like, okay, you just don't stop. Whether that's
Yeah.
business, of course, there's moments of reflection and pivoting, you name it, and we can get in there. But I think for me, into the question of interviews, obviously Larry King was the most impactful for me, but that phrase of keep going, never quit speaks volumes to even my approach to podcasting. I could have stopped so many times, whether that was, oh, like no one cares, no one's listening. Like, oh, it's a lot. I'm in high school. It's expensive to put all this content, traveling to get to people, all that stuff. Like you just have to, yeah, like silence that voice. And I think just again to the question of people, that's what I've been obsessed with over the years is just the ability to connect, the ability to learn from, um, and just the belief in that from doing that consistently, not only great things will happen, but you get to create great things and have the incredible resources of experience at your fingertips when doing a show and when connecting with high level people.
Yeah, and you're the only person who has to like even see the dream or even have the belief. And Uriah Faber, who's UFC Hall of Famer, he was my third guest, and that's exactly what he said because he was pioneering this bantamweight division in the UFC when the UFC wasn't even really the UFC. And he's like, dude, I just had this dream and I had this lifestyle and I knew kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to take this shit big. No one was betting on me, but it didn't matter. Like as long as I knew that it could happen, I was like, let's just go to work. And like what you
Yeah,
said is so many people are so deterred when things don't go well or they get slapped with a little failure or setbacks. But you tell me, anybody who's ever done anything big, cool, inspirational, remarkable in this world, success was never linear for them.
absolutely. Spot
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And let's go into that about your success story with Media Kits. It was acquired in 2022, but talk to me about the origins of it. And I really am excited to hear about like from day 1 to month 3 to year 1, like give me
Mhm.
that journey.
Yeah. So Media Kits, for those that don't know, is a company that I launched in 2021, and it was a tech product which allowed creators, which mean social media creators, podcasters, musicians, athletes, to create a media kit or more so a digital resume with real time data and
Yep.
analytics. And we were solving one key problem, which was influencers don't have a way to aggregate all of their social media statistics in one place and then easily share that through a link. And then on the flip side, brands don't have a way to view trustworthy and verified creator data. And how this idea came about was, um, back in 2018, when I was still in high school as a senior, I met then a friend that which turned into business partner, Kieran, who introduced me to his friend that goes by the name of JR Garage on YouTube, who's a big automotive YouTuber. And he knew we were in the marketing field. We were all getting super close as friends. And Jeff came to us one day and said, "Hey guys, Pennzoil reached out to me. They asked me for my media kit. Can you guys make me one? I have no idea what it is, and I need to send it to them so I can hopefully close this deal." Or they want to see my statistics before we even talk about the deal. So we're like, sure. We make him one on Canva, which looked like asking him for screenshots of all of his social media data and typing in all the numbers manually, and asking him for a headshot and putting that on this document takes us about an hour or so. We send him this big clunky email, file through email, and he's downloading it and reattaching it to an email to Pennzoil, and great, sends it out. He ends up getting the deal. Fast forward a couple of weeks, he comes to us again and says, "Hey guys, thanks again for the media kit, but Ferrari just contacted me. They want to do this big influencer activation down in Daytona Beach, Florida. Can you update my media kit? All the numbers are outdated. I had this video go viral, and I want to change it up." So I'm like, sure. So we go back, we're changing ones to twos and threes to fours in terms of the numbers, changing his picture, you name it, send it to him again, he gets the deal. And, it just became very clear to us, like, we asked ourselves, why isn't there a way for creators to create a media kit that never gets outdated, that you never have to go back and update, and it just stays up to date in real time? And then again, to that question, which was, why aren't brands viewing trustworthy and verified creator data? Because it's so easy to just put a bunch of fake numbers on a media kit. So that's when we had the idea and the inspiration for the product. But I think, and this just goes back to even what we were talking about earlier, which is timing. I was about to graduate high school. My friend, which turned out to be business partner, Kieran, he had an agency. We were both still living in Virginia. It wasn't the right time to launch it, and it just didn't work out. So we ended up shelving the idea. Then fast forward to 2020, we're now living in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we both moved out to after high school. Jeff had different family there, and we just thought it was a great city to be in. I had business partners out there as well for this media company I was running. And when we were living in Scottsdale, Kieran and I were roommates, and we saw this resurgence of creators on TikTok, right? TikTok was blowing up. All this, crazy influencer marketing is happening. So we're like, this is interesting. And we just slowly started surveying and getting feedback from a lot of creators that we've known over the years. And, by that time I've had my podcast, I've done hundreds of interviews. Like, I have a network of people. So we were running this idea by lots of great qualified creators or people that work in the space, got our conviction from, the need that they saw, and also just had belief in it ourselves. Then we started working on it towards the middle of 2020, just bootstrap, like chipping away at it, ideations, then started working with a design agency. Then quickly fast forward into 2021, early 2021 is when we just not only committed to it, but we saw and had like what we wanted to build in terms of the vision, what we wanted to do from a team perspective. And we decided to go raise capital. So we ended up going out and raising just over $1 million, 1.3, 1.5 in there, and launched the product later that year in August of 2021. And mind you, this was someone that had no like tech experience. Kieran and I are not technical. Like the chips, how they were stacked, in my opinion, looking back, not that it didn't look favorable, but we just had to think so differently about business, coming from no tech background and no founding CTO. But we had the belief, and obviously the people that invested, which comes back to the main point, which I talked about earlier, of podcasting. And this is something that I love sharing because it's just so impactful in terms of my approach to life and business and brand building and podcasting, which was about 95% of the people that invested in the media kits, which was about 37 people, I believe, came from or were previous guests from the podcast. And reflecting on that, it's, through the years of trust and getting to know someone and just them watching my journey, you name it, the ability to sit down with them, share an idea, not only pitch them, but just present this opportunity that we were going out to build. We ended up closing the round, and again, launched the product in August 2021. We had Wiz Khalifa come out and perform at our launch party. We had 700 different creators there, and it was just more so this moment of not only announcing the product, but making a big splash in the scene of the creator economy. And, without going too deep, but fast forward a year later is when we um, got acquired by Viral Nation, which is an incredible, like very big influencer marketing tech
Yeah.
conglomerate up in Canada, in Toronto. Um, so yeah, that's like the story from beginning to end without going too deep in any area.
Dude, I love how organic like the progression is, and like everything you did before that, the podcasting, the networking, the conversations, the setbacks, it just primed you for when you needed, to go, when you needed to have those conversations, when you needed to ask people for money. Like you started to understand who you are, what your strengths were, maybe what your weaknesses were, and then you just got this confidence about yourself and your brand. You and your partner Kieran, it's like, dude, let's go for this. And that's something that I just had a conversation with my buddy the other day about. I was like, at the end of the day, like, what happens if it actually works out? Because so many people are so scared that it won't work out, they don't even go down that path, right? It's like that fear of failure is so detrimental. And probably, if I'm even thinking about my friend group, I got so many guys who want to do stuff, but they won't even take the first step because they don't think, they don't believe in themselves, they don't believe in the idea, or they're just too worried of someone else's opinion or the fact that it may not work out the way that they want it to. So, dude, hats off to you guys.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I think there's a quote, and I might butcher it, and I think you're spot on. And this quote says, "The fear of failure kills more dreams than failure ever will."
Facts. Facts.
And I think it's just what we're both talking about, and especially like what you just noted there is, and I have there's so much truth in that like so many people, like even something, and again, I correlate things back to running because I think it's subjective in terms of it's easily measurable. Where in business there's so many like unknown variables at times, but like running a marathon, like the if the fear of running a marathon of like, oh, you're not going to finish, it's too long, you might pass out, you might die, like this fear that people have, like that is not for me, like it will stop everyone, or not everyone, but the majority of people that ever want to run a marathon than the people that commit to it and actually fail and not complete it, right? Like this idea of just not even taking the first step at the starting line, like that's the beauty of just being in the arena, right? Just like being in the mentality of action oriented. And again, like we all, I believe, have these ideas of like fear of failure, but it speaks to that idea of like that voice in your head that we were talking about earlier, which is just like, it's not that you have to silence it, but you can't listen to it and you can't believe that it is true, whether that's from committing to things like 75 hard or starting a new venture, like whether you fail or not. And you can fail forward, of course, but this idea of just not even getting started on a mission or a purpose that you feel, even for a moment, that feels right for you, but then you silence it out. Oh, because life. Oh, because of this. Oh, I can't do that because of this. I think that's where a lot of like lost, not only dreams, but momentum is, right? Like it's just about stacking the daily momentum, the stacking the daily wins, and then the ability to look back and say, wow, like you and I both, whether that's sports or business or podcasting, you can look back and say like, wow, I'm so glad that I got started, and again, not to drop just quotes all day, but it's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today, right? Like if this idea of missing the boat or it's too late, I think it can be so just, it can set so many people back. And of course it's normal, but I think it speaks volumes to like what you were saying about this fear of failure.
And failure is so temporary, but I promise you, regret that lasts a lifetime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. TM that. Put it somewhere. All right. So, are you and Kieran still involved with Media Kits, or did you kind of hand that over entirely?
Yeah. So the Media Kits is a subsidiary of Viral Nation. So the whole company's in there. So what happened was our whole team worked at Viral Nation. I worked there for about 6 months, and then now I'm no longer there and work on other projects. So Kieran and I were no longer there. He has a cool venture that he's about to launch that I won't speak too much about. And same over here on my end. But I think what was so important to us in making that decision with Viral Nation was, the tech that we built and, the community that we built was all focused on creators. And Viral Nation has 1,500 plus thousands of different creators that they represent internally, exclusively, you name it, and just their vision for influencer marketing, the creator economy was so in line with how we viewed the future of media kits and these synergies there, that the ability to have a product live in an ecosystem that is flourishing in the sense of the business of, Viral Nation raised a $200 million private equity round. They have hundreds of different employees. They work with some of the biggest brands in the space, from Meta to Google, you name it. And you can learn more about them on their website. But for us, in terms of like the product itself, that was so important for not only ourselves as founders, but for the team, for the investors. And I'm really just excited and happy about the outcome. But to the question exactly, no longer there, and focused on new exciting projects.
No, unbelievable. So let's talk about building a personal brand, because everyone wants to, whether they want to admit it or not, they want to build a personal brand. So give the listeners some insight on where they should start.
Yeah. So I think this idea of building a personal brand can be daunting a lot of times for people, of like, if you're not used to putting your face out there on camera, if you're not used to putting out content in general, you don't come from that world, or maybe you see everyone doing it, but you're still just afraid to. I think this idea of building a personal brand should be just rethought about in terms of, we all have not only our identity, but this authentic version of ourselves that you bring into every conversation, your reputation, right? And this idea, and how I define personal branding, especially from a social media perspective, which we're here talking about today, which is representing the most authentic version of yourself in a digital format. And I think this idea of building a personal brand and sort of the blueprint that you can follow, again, it's all different. There's so many creative ways that people are putting out content. But for me, and over the years, I've just become so aligned with, which is, this idea of having a podcast. For me, it gives me this foundation of being able to create so much content, interview people, have conversations, create long form content, to then create so many short form clips to then distribute amongst social media, in which the way I do. And I think, just if you want to get started building a personal brand, like, find your medium, which is like, what is the first thing that you want to start? Is it just creating short form content and creating it in terms of sitting down, recording a video, maybe doing editing, maybe not, and putting it out there? Or is it something like, we're doing right now, or what I do in my podcast, which is I'm able to just create long form content and then take that and just disperse it in micro moments.
Yeah.
But it's and building a personal brand is also much more than just short form content at scale, right? It's like, what is your mission? What are you known for? Like, what are you building, right? Like, this idea, and I've always thought about this in a different light over the years, is because when I was starting my personal brand, I was 17 or 16, I just turned 16. I had no businesses, I had no experience, I had no successes. So this idea of like, when I started to build my personal brand, I was just building it off of like, let me do book reviews, and like, this is my personality, this is my story, the most important thing, which is like, what is your foundational story that people can buy into, that people can understand, that people can more so fall in love with in their own context. And once you, because I think a lot of people too, like, we all have our own stories, but if you were to throw anyone on a podcast that has no real clue what a podcast is, and you just, have them on, they're talking about their story, you'll quickly learn like the story that they tell themselves, the story that they tell themselves about their life, those moments that changed you, the growing experiences, like what you do today and what led to that. Like, they'll answer all these questions that I think a lot of people don't ask themselves when they think about their life. They're, you're so caught up in the day to day, you're so caught up in what's next, in your family, business, like job, whatever it may be, and that's okay, and that's just life. But when thinking about building a personal brand, ask yourself, like, how can I capture, especially from like a foundational level, how can I capture my story and the story that I tell myself, the story that I believe is true, in which my journey, how can I showcase that in a foundational way on social media? Like, let me just sit down and record myself telling my story to get clear on even the story that I tell myself and the story that I want to put out into the world. And I think once you understand that, you can start to ask yourselves, like, okay, what niche do I want to talk about? Is this purely, obviously, from a business perspective, you may have this crazy story, but in the current form of yourself, you might be a realtor. So it's like building a personal brand about being a realtor. Like, you need to do things in a creative way to hopefully drive you business and talk about real estate and bring value to an audience. Like, how do you do that? And I think it starts by just even seeking what other people are doing in the space, right? Like, you want to start a podcast, go watch and follow the top 5, 10 podcasters or the people that you believe are doing a great job and model them in your own right, in your own way. And I think if you do that, which is understand your story, get clear on the niche or focus of, how you want to be known, and then use model others in your own format, it's a great just foundational way to think about personal branding. But again, I think the most important thing is just don't overthink it, right? Like, put out a single Instagram story today, even if you have 200 followers, sharing your day and what you're doing and documenting your life. Like, that is the first step in building a personal brand, which is just the documentation, the ability to focus on output instead of input, instead of scrolling all day and consuming. How can you be a producer on social media, which means producing content for not only your personal brand, but just you as an individual. And that's where, to the beginning of this conversation, discipline comes in. It's easy to maybe get on social one day, put out a story, share something, and to not do it for a month, not do it for a year, not do it for however long. But the ability to be consistent with even thinking about building a personal brand, content itself, I believe that's all beyond important, and truthfully, like the framework that not people should follow,
Just
but should think
verbalizing
about
my
when
story
even
through the
considering building
podcast
a
has
personal
given
brand.
me more clarity on where I want to go and everything I've learned up until now than anything else in my life. And like you just said, like, post and just focus on getting one done and then two done. It's like you're just building reps and you're giving yourself that back. And it's like, yeah, like, and then you're also quick to figure out, is this something I really want to do? It could be an idea that looks cool because other people are doing it, but
Yeah.
you can't base your life and your aspirations on somebody else who's doing it, because you're never going to do what they're doing. You just can't mimic someone entirely. It's like, I think that's another important piece of this, is understanding what you really want to do, what you really value, and just be true and authentic yourself. Yeah. All right. Brands.
Absolutely.
You've pitched yourself to investors, to brands, to companies, you name it. But you have a pretty big backing. You've got followers behind your name. You have clout. What about the individuals who may not have thousands of followers, but still have, a unique story or potential and huge drive? How would you approach that? What advice would you give them? Because there's a lot of those individuals out there.
Yeah, I think, I actually, it's super relevant right now in my mind because the other day, earlier this week, I should say, I spoke to a class at UCLA, and it was this class of creators, marketers, and it was a very cool experience for me, especially considering I didn't go to college. But um, when I was speaking to this class, we were talking about brands and pitching yourself to brands, using a media kit in the context of today's conversation. But one thing that I said was, brands, especially nowadays, in my opinion, like, yes, it's easy to go find the big creator. It's easy for you to think like, oh, they have a big budget, this big creator, they're just going to pay him whatever. What brands appreciate and respect so much is the ability for you, the creator, or someone that wants to represent a brand, to reach out, to pitch yourself, to get in a phone call with them, to actually focus on building a relationship with someone on that team, and to express the level of interest and joy that you get from that product, whether that's a consumer packaged good or a tech product, whatever it may be. And if you do that, if you just focus on like, how can you get in touch with the brand, how can you then tell them about yourself and why you love their product if you actually use it, to then get on a phone call with them, I think you'd be surprised by the opportunities that can arise from that, instead of just thinking like, how can I reach out to a brand and get paid tomorrow to represent it? Like, that's, yes, it happens a lot of times. Massive creators, you name it, they can have their manager reach out, they have a marketing budget, they'll pay them whatever. But the creator economy, brands want to work with truly aligned creators, and it all comes down to like, what are their marketing efforts, right? In terms of what's important to them now. But I would say, like, focus 99% of your effort on just creating those opportunities in terms of the outputs. All right. If you think about reaching out to brands similar to podcasting, it's like I'm not going to get, especially in the early days, any guests on my show. Literally zero, unless I do the work to reach out, to pitch the show, to pitch myself. If they probably won't respond, to follow up, to then, oh, they get a response. Great. Let's schedule it right now. Let's schedule the podcast. And if you don't do that, you're not just going to start a show and say, oh, great, people are going to come to me, especially if you're just getting started. And maybe don't have an audience or anyone that's helping you by any means, which a lot of people don't, including myself in the early days. And I think when you're looking to reach out to brands, it's the same thing. Like, never expect a brand to ever reach out for you. Even if you're gaining momentum, you're putting out content, the whole thing, you need to be proactive and reach out to them. And I think that's the non-starter when it comes to even the thought process of working with brands.
Final question, which I ask everyone, is what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
That's a great question. Best piece of advice I've ever received. I think the best piece of advice I've ever received from Larry King, in the spirit of the most impactful interview, he said, and this is a quote by him during our show, but therefore it turned into just true advice. He says, I've never learned anything while I was talking. And he embraced this idea of being a listener in conversation with a guest when he's doing a broadcast with a president, to being a listener to the guy you're having a conversation with on the subway, even though you're busy, you have emails to respond to, your mind's a million miles an hour, to when you're spending time with your family and just like truly listening. I think we're always, as humans, and especially ambitious entrepreneurs or people building anything, this ability to always communicate and to share your thoughts and to articulate, what you want or to a team is great. But the best leaders, the best world-class entrepreneurs, they are all great at listening to their team, to their customers, to their investors, to the people that matter the most to them. And I think that piece of advice just impacts every aspect of life, in a relationship, in a business setting, in a marriage, and you name it. Just this ability to be a great listener stands true in every category, and I think it's been a foundational piece of advice that I live by.
Dude, epic. I've never heard that one, but dude, Casey, this was great. I mean, I can't tell you how grateful I am for your time, how open you were, even just being vulnerable with your life, your journey and experiences, because I gained a ton of value from this, and the listeners do. Before we sign off, where can the audience and the listeners follow you, and what can they expect from you in the future, if you're okay with sharing?
Yeah, yeah, and of course. So the best place you can find me is just at Casey on Instagram or CaseyAdams.com. Podcast is the Casey Adams Show on all things Spotify, podcast app, you name it, anywhere you listen, you can find it. And then I know we briefly touched on it, and just something that, in the spirit of being, a podcaster myself, I recently launched this new tool for podcasters called listener.fm, which is an AI tool that allows podcasters to automate their post-production process using AI. And phenomenal tool. I use it myself. And if you want to check that out, it's just listener.fm. And if you have questions, or if you're a podcaster, you want to learn more, shoot me a DM. I'm always happy to chat about it.
I use it. It streamlines so much of my stuff. It gives AI generated like topics, summaries, timestamps, potential names, titles for the segments. It's super helpful. You guys killed it. It's making my life easy. And I'm grateful for it. But man, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Christian. This has been such a great time.
Keep changing the world, man.